Choices. We live on choices, and some of us even die on choices. Every day, choices are made. How do we make choices? Now, a great deal is known about this. A great deal is known about this because of new brain scans. Using superconductivity, it is possible to record electrical activity so splendidly that you can record an electrocardiogram through 5 feet of air. Any of you who've taken electrocardiograms know that in an ordinary hospital, like would be available in Chattanooga, you have to take off the oil film before ordinary electronics will record a decent, clean electrocardiogram. But using superconductivity and PET scans and MR scans, you can take a picture of what the brain is doing in 4 dimensions, left and right, up and down, and the Z direction, and time to seconds. So when you think a thought, when you search for a noun, you can find out where in the brain what is happening. Isn't that amazing? All right. Next, please. The will is the center of the human brain regarding regulation, control. Next, please. The will has got the answers. You might turn down that volume just a little bit. Testing, 1, 2, 3. So the will is the steering wheel of the brain. Next. Which can lead us either up and forward or down to ashes. Now, here's what's going on today. If you float intellectually in your community, and if you think the will is a 19th century conception for conservative thinkers, today's lecture should disabuse you of all such sectarian nonsense. No. Next. Look at here. This is Steps to Christ, page 47. Let's read it all together. What you need to understand is the true force of the will. This is the governing power in the nature of man, the power of decision or choice. Everything depends upon the right action of the will. Now you see, here's where I got the research clue as to know what rocks to turn over. You see? Here's the research clue. And some of you who may have studied ontology are quite familiar that truth is a unit and it's consistent with itself in all of its manifestations. You see? Colossians 2:3, speaking of God, in whom are hid, how much? All the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. This means, fellow thinkers, that the truth in the Bible, the truth in the spirit of prophecy, and the truth in the brain research are going in one direction. They have unity, they have cohesiveness, they have interrelatedness, and if we will get with it, we will grow rapidly, not slowly. Next. Let's read it all together. Through the right exercise of the will, an entire change may be made in the life. What book is that? Who is this book designed for? Well, that's designed for the human race. It is probably the most translated book on the horizon. It's a magnificent book. I was studying it this morning. And if Steps to Christ is not new to you, when you read it tomorrow morning or any time, you need a brain scan for dementia. If it's not new. Everything depends upon our choice. Next, please. Our relationships. Now, in that picture are the newly married Mr. and Mrs. Berlin. Would you please stand? I think they're here today. Here they are. Yes. Yes. Mr. and Mrs. Berlin. Now, a week ago, she was my secretary. But she's not now. She got a raise. She is my associate. Let me tell you what happened. I had this preparation on the dynamics of the will designed for Loma Linda University professionals. And it was clearly in the electronic belfry of the human condition. All right. Now, this young lady, see her name up there in the top screen, Helen? She brought this down to earth so that common people can get it. Yes, thank you, Helen. Yes, she used to be a secretary, not now. She's an associate. You better believe it. All right, our health. Now look, this little meeting is sponsored by the health department in the conference. Now look, the big crisis in American health is very simple. We've got the information. Here's what we need to do. Eat less, eat wiser, and exercise more. But unless your will is in high gear, it won't happen. No, nothing of the kind. No. The Laodicean approach to health is very simple. Let other people try it. Please pass the ice cream. See. So look. Since the executive centers in the brain run the brain, they're in the frontal lobe. We know exactly where they are. If your will is not vigorous, if you don't have a high-octane will, you've got a low-octane brain because it's the governing power in the nature of man. Now look, if you talk this with university people, you're going to get into big trouble. Here's why. Now, I started lecturing in physiological psychology at George Washington University as a graduate student. My professor was in charge of the class, and he enjoyed breaks, and so he would say, Bernell, will you please take care of this section on the hypothalamus? See, and I'd lecture for him, and he had more time for golf or whatever. All right. Then at Loma Linda, I was taught there in the med school for 14 years in the university, and I taught physiological psychology in Loma Linda. And so we're familiar with this field. And I did 2 theses in Washington on the front brain and have been teaching physiology of the brain for ever since. About 30 years. And if you study an area for 30 years, if you don't know something about it, you ought to get lost. You get the picture, all right? Look, our happiness turns on the successful use of the will. Oh, yes. Ask newlyweds. They will tell you all about this. All right. Next, our life. See this family? They are in the health business. Exercise, fresh air, sunshine, social reinforcement, and togetherness of a family. That's a perfect combination for making people out of things. Next, the will is the governing power in the nature of man, bringing, you see that little red, all the other faculties under its sway. Executive centers are in the frontal lobe of the brain. So this afternoon's presentation, instead of being a turning of the crank, eeny, miny, mo, catch that boring health message by a molecule. No. The will is the governing power in the nature of man, bringing all the other faculties under its sway. The will is not the taste or the inclination, but it is a deciding power which works in the children of man to either obedience or disobedience. Next, please. Anatomy. Now, there's a top view of the human brain. Okay. The largest lobe of the whole brain is frontal. You see that crack right there called the sulcus? Everything to the left of my hand is frontal lobe. Largest lobe of the whole brain. Almost twice as large as any other lobe. A touch of comparative brain science. In a cat, only 3% of the brain is frontal. I have a standard arrangement with my wife. Dr. Marjorie, the first time we see a seeing eye cat, we'll buy one. Now, cats can see mice, an occasional lizard, etc. But cats don't have the equipment to faithfully protect anybody. Going, oh, no. All right. So up to 30% of the human brain is frontal lobe. And an ordinary university, they can't tell you more than about 4 peanuts about the frontal lobe because they believe in evolution, you see. And accidents don't make the 6-layered cortex that can design equipment to deliver men on the moon. Next. Frontal lobe, there it is. It's massive, it's big. It takes 30 years for men to myelinate the frontal lobe. Ladies can do it in 25. Men, it takes 30, according to Yakovlev of Harvard University. Next, please. Now here's cutting-edge brain science. Luria. Now, the University of Moscow is bigger than Berkeley. Americans don't know this. And teachers in Russia are so highly regarded that they are respected instead of tolerated. Okay, now Luria is professor of psychology at University of Moscow, and he has a book on neuropsychology called The Working Brain. Page 89 says, the tertiary portions of the frontal lobes are in fact a superstructure above how much? All other parts of the cerebral cortex. Complete concordance with spiritual grandmother who speaks, writes, and communicates with old-fashioned conservatives. I refer to EGW. See? All other parts of the cerebral cortex, so that they perform a far more universal function of general regulation of behavior. Next, Moscow physiology of choice runs on synapses. You can make a new synapse on an IDEO program in 2.5 hours. If you're stumbling along on a junk food diet, you're dodging exercise, you get C- sleep, your boss is a bore, your family is a tangle, then you make very few synapses. Matter of fact, you lose them. Up to 75,000 a day, gone forever. Now, the teaching in aging 10 years ago used to be, well, everybody loses neurons 50 and 75,000 a day. 3 chairs for the teenagers. Now we know, this is new information. Look, you came out to this place on Sabbath afternoon. You deserve new information. Look, you can make new stem cells in 4 places in the brain. And when you exercise, like 5 minutes, about like this, when you exercise like this, goodbye everybody, I'm headed for the woods. When you really exercise, you make new stem cells for new synapses, for new chips. Got it? And furthermore, these neurons can migrate. And if your brain is not made out of butter, cheese, and dead animals, these cells can migrate. Let that distant resonant ceiling represent the cortex. Here's what we're saying. You can make brand new nerve cells here in the bottom of the brain. They can migrate to go up there and keep the roof from leaking. Yes. But if you've got a saturated brain, this won't happen very well. And this is one of the key problems in Washington. They use more alcohol per square mile in the District of Columbia than any place on earth. Don't plan on Washington saving money. Count on them spending money, your money, by the jillion. Next. Now, this is Stuss and Benson, leading brain researchers in a distant little school called UCLA. Human will appears to be a frontal function. Next. Fuster. Monograph, prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex transcends motor and sensory processes. Now look, if you're an ordinary university student going through ordinary psych departments, they will teach you Watsonian behaviorism, and they will teach you that the environment controls the person. So the way to cure the modern ghetto is to throw money at it. You know, throw socialism at it. See? Change the environment. And look, you remember this funny idea in the Bible? Nothing good can come out of Nazareth, right? That's modern, just as modern as Berkeley. Nothing good can come out of Nazareth because the environment is shot. But if you're awake this afternoon and you understand that you are an individual, you're unique, and there's nobody else like you on the planet, and you can choose, play the piano, play the organ, or play the buttons. Yes. Next. In PET scanning experiment, now this is Passingham from a little school across the water called Oxford. Department of Experimental Psych, University of Oxford. In his monograph, The Frontal Lobe's Involuntary Action. Now look, have a little it's hard to do this inside of a university because the peer group dynamics and the mainstream thinking is so heavy that if you actually try to defend free moral will, they'll shoot you down. They could hardly tolerate you. But you need to know that PET scans, electronics, neuroanatomy, fitting with the Adventist conception of the brain and not Darwin's. You know, you need to get this real clear. And in this kind of a context, we don't need to pussyfoot around to meet the stale, secular minds of people who don't know where they're going. Look, Darwin can't explain to you how that the brain has free moral capacity. You know, see, this is a different world than the secularists know anything about. See, they believe in mechanism, secularism, determinism, Darwinism. See, it's a different universe than what modern brain research is revealing. The PET scanning experiments with human subjects, the dorsal prefrontal cortex is associated when subjects generate a series of actions at will. Now look, this is a whole book about the subject from Oxford, Experimental Psych, University of Oxford, and the ordinary psych department. Now look, I do not have to pussyfoot in this area because my salary doesn't come from the conventionals. 3 cheers. The ordinary psych department is Babylonian. See, they get a little bit from Sigmund and a little bit from Skinner. Skinner, B.F. Skinner, big shot psychologist, he wrote a book, Beyond Freedom and Dignity. Dust it off. And you'll see why the average university is lobotomized and don't know it. Because they got so much Sigmund and so much Darwin and so much confusion that the students don't know who they are, where they came from, the swamp, or where they're going, the ash pile or the stars. They have no idea. Next. Where does the will get its info? Now look, here's where we're headed. A broad-minded electronic view of how the will works. Hang on. Next. The whole brain is interconnected, and no faculty is an island. See? Now, if this were an ordinary television program, here's what we do. And I've done 250 of them and know a thing or two about them. The will would be a quick fix approach so that you can make more money sooner. Next. No. Listen up. What factors act on the will? Next. The will must be governed by calm, intelligent, what's that word? Reason. Counsel in Health, 113. Next. The conscience, illuminated by divine grace, would be quick and pure, controlling the will. How about that? Next. The best guide for choices in life is what? Of course, Abraham Lincoln was onto this. Next. Truth must be received into the soul. It claims the homage of the will. DA 455. Next. Some choices are complicated. For instance, Penn said, this is the spies, You remember they had a fact-finding commission to survey Canaan, you see, after they're coming out of Egypt. Now look what the majority said. 10 said what? 2 said yes. So look, if you're going to follow the majority, get ready for circles in the desert. See? And as they die off, one by one, you see, then, after 40 years, what happened to the 2 men? One's Joshua. Who's the other one? Caleb. Do you remember that Caleb requested that he would like to be responsible for attacking the hardest problem on the horizon? And you remember what he did? He and his men did it. So now look, are you following the majority or are you following the 2 or the 10? Most people, frankly, most Adventists follow the majority. Look, when the self-supporters, let me take an illustration. When the self-supporters went to London, and they went to the leaders of the Adventist scene in England, and they proposed a serious restaurant in downtown London. Bottom line, do you know what the big shot said? It can't be done. Okay? So what did these Calebs and Joshuas do? They started one, New Gallery. And George Vandeman and Falkenberg went in there and they made waves in London. I'm here to tell you. Okay? Now, in due course of time, human nature has an issue of getting tired. You know, changes come. People retire. Okay? Do you know what they did at the New Gallery? One of the finest spiritual forts in the entire nation. Do you know what happened in the New Gallery? Sold it. What a magnificent stroke of generalship. Fantastically ridiculous. Another case, New York. Anybody here ever been to New York? Okay. You remember? Look, here's what happened. A spiritual-minded leader in Florida started vans, lots of them, more than a dozen, and won the confidence of a gentleman in the state. Have you ever heard of Disney? Okay. Disney thought that this was wonderful. This is why Seventh-day Adventists have a visible presence in Disney Holdings in Florida now. Okay? All right. So the entering wedge, Brother Dembski, works. It certainly does work. It certainly does work. I remember seeing a gold watch this big around in Brother Scharfenberg's pocket. Said, "Brother Scharfenberg, where'd you get this gold watch?" "King Saud sent it to me." Entering wedge. Yes, sir, brother. And if we're going to do justice to the massive geopolitical crisis of the Muslims, we jolly well had better follow the blueprint instead of grandfather's tradition. Politics won't cut it. We need faith, we need vision, and we need willpower to cut it. Be careful about following the majority. because you just might find that the world is round instead of flat. Next. Life requires careful choices. You know, there's a place in Manhattan. If you miss one sign, you end in the wrong state. You know, you got to choose carefully. Next. Mount of Blessings, 61. It is through the will that sin retains its hold upon us. My, how about that? Next. Severe problem. Now this is UCLA, 143. Severe problems can happen when the frontal lobe is damaged as by, look, one drink of alcohol in ladies will atrophy the frontal lobe. New York Times, 3 months ago. It's well known. Why? Because ladies are deficient in alcohol dehydrogenase in two places. One, gastric mucosa. Two, liver. One drink a day will put them right down the pipes. Takes two for men. Meanwhile, conventional cardiologists, not so much in this particular town, but even Harvard, will allow and will exceed and even recommend 2 drinks a day for men to protect the heart. You've heard this? Standard propaganda for the heart. And what they don't know is this, that the surface volume ratio of stellate cells in the frontal lobe is such that a little bit of alcohol over a period of years will gradually erode and destroy the very top of the brain. And that's the University of Sydney. Been going on for years. Here's what we're saying. Moderate drinking over a period of years will give you a dignified, conventional lobotomy. How glamorous. See? And this is one of the main problems in New York and one of the main problems in Washington. Booze in the chips. Just, it gradually wipes them out. So you have, according to Fuster, UCLA, moral restraints go down the pipes. Appetite control, oopsie-dee, take the Greystone series in Canada. The average weight gain of these ladies after lobotomy was over 40 pounds. The winner was a lady who gained 90 pounds of weight when her frontal lobe was destroyed with psychosurgery. All right, folks. Omura, Japan, has shown axons, wires that go from the frontal lobe right down to the feeding center. So, when the conscience says, Mrs. Chattanooga, you've eaten enough, stop. Okay? If the will is weak, conventional, and fed on television and junk food, then you know what they do? Eat some more. All you have to do is to eat one extra slice of bread, and in 1 year you gain 10 pounds. Add it up. This stuff is serious. And so look, today's little lectures on this big subjects can shed light on why 30% of Americans are obese. Because the frontal lobe is out to lunch. Next, please. Okay, here's a side view of the brain. And it shows roughly how things are related. Here's the portion of the brain that is larger and better in ladies than men. See this right here? Corpus Callosum. And one of the main reasons why an intelligent lady can keep track of 2 children, 2 burners on the stove, the telephone, and the washing machine simultaneously is because their brain is better, corpus callosum. Better. Now, if you bring this up in a university, it'll start a little discussion, and they will try and shoot you down. But here's what they're not doing. They're comparing the corpus callosum in a lady in a brain that is 180 grams lighter, you see, compared to what they should. So the lady's corpus callosum is bigger for their brain than the men have for theirs. And this is not media. Media thinking isn't into that by a long shot. And you very well know, if you're going to follow the majority, here's what they teach, practice, model, and think. They think that men and women are unisex designed, and that the women are just as smart or smarter than the man. If you don't think so, ask them. Oh, yes, yes. So that, I remember I put together a television program. You can very easily find at least a dozen things in which women are superior to men when it comes to the brain. Like, let me be courtesy of Ellen. I'll try to meet the people where they are. Take the checkbook. It's a fact. Ladies can add up figures and keep them straighter, better, and faster than men can. My wife is the treasurer. Yes. But if you need to go to the North Pole, you need men. See, man's brain is focused to a target, to a goal, to winning. They're built this way. But ladies, now look, we get quite serious, fast. If you'll study, here's what you'll find out. You'll find that helping a community, ladies can go into the home and do more good to more families and more children than men can. Because you see, the lady will come into the house and she'll detect in about 10 seconds the children need this, the mother needs help and encouragement and X, Y, and Z. Whereas the men, they come in, this place is not on fire, next. That's the way men figure. So what's the bottom line? Viva la différence. Yes, indeed. If one can chase 1,000, 2 can put 10,000 to flight. So look, God designed us. Let's get with the action. And we don't need to lock ourselves up in the silly little cocktail party arguments. Not necessary. Here's a side view of the brain. Notice how thick and ample the frontal lobe is. See how thick this is from here to here? But politicians aren't endowed with this kind of equipment. No. They have developed in a very high degree the art of compromise, you see. And they negotiate, you see, and they try to trade money for power and this, that, and the other. And they get in. We're fresh out of Lincoln's, right? Abraham Lincoln is dead. And so is our destiny. You remember hearing about the decline and fall of Rome? Well, we've got it right now. We're living in it. The last decline and fall of a great, magnificent country who could change the whole world. But now, you know all about it. Next. How can we improve the power of the will? It is now time for a serious break. After the break, we're going to get into this with vigor so that when you leave along about 5 o'clock, you'll be well equipped for progress, success, and victory forever. Is there anything in the last hour that somebody would like to see clarified? You know, in other words, is it really quite clear that the brain is run by the will? Is that real clear? Okay. And is it real clear that instead of the will running in a vacuum, no, it should be surrounded with truth. 2, the conscience has electronic connections of the will. Okay. Now, is it quite clear that, it should be if it isn't, that if the blood is clean and pure, then the brain is going to work better? Most of your neighbors are trying, they would like to think and worship like Daniel, but live like Nebuchadnezzar. That's, that's where they're at. They would like to eat something dead at least 2 times a day, not knowing. This is Willett, Harvard University, recent data that your neighbors have never heard of. They don't know. How many of you have ice skated? Hands up. When you hear a real crack in ice skating, what do?
Hit the bank.
You look for better ice, thicker ice. Yes. Now, as a communicator, be assured I'm familiar with thin ice. Welcome to thin ice. Willett has shown and published in a little journal called Cancer Causes that 1 glass of cow's milk, a meal, will increase metastatic cancer of the prostate 40%. Published. How many of you have ever heard that? Hands up. You aren't supposed to. No, you're supposed to follow the dairy lobby right into the cholesterol marsh. Okay, now let me repeat that, because some people might. In the afternoon like this, the average person has learned and they practice electronic snoring. And the brain waves are so slow that anything really serious and new goes right over the head, like swallows headed for Capistrano. See, like this. And they really don't. Now, let me try that again. 1 glass of cow's milk in men, 1 glass of cow's milk per meal will increase metastatic cancer of the prostate 40%. 1 glass of meat, 60%. Both, get a load of this, 40% cow's milk, 60% meat. Both of them, 200%. Okay. So, please excuse me for being weaned for 50 years. Works great. No, kindly name, a little comparative biology. Kindly name one mammal that is not weaned. Let's see. Deer, reindeer, moose, cows. Look over the ungulates. They've got a funny biological custom. When they've got their growth, when their bones are long enough to really run away from the bears, the lions, and such, they get weaned. How about that? How daring. How dashing can you get? All right. So, cancer of the prostate, Cairns of England has written for years. There are 100 times more cancer in some places than there are in others. Take cancer of the breast, commonest cause of death of women 20 to 50 years of age. Okay. The local laser beam. Let's see if it'll work. There it is. Okay. You see the fancy little dot? You see this dot? Okay. Now you see way up there where that rafters start for the roof? There's the cancer level, cancer of the breast, for Americans, Canadians, Northern Europe, Australia, way up there. Classical Japanese women, 4 to 10 times better here. Classical, before McDonald's. See, here, this is called migration studies, highly studied and well published. Okay, here's classic Japanese grandmothers. Their daughters in Hawaii, 50% of us. Here are the daughters. And granddaughters in California, just like us. Way up there they are. Granddaughters, Japanese. Daughters, Hawaii. Grandmother, on 20 grams of soy protein a day. Here's grandmothers down here. Okay. Do you know where Adventist women are? 82%. Look, see? There are the Philistines, here are the Adventists. How glamorous. Now, how in the world does this happen? What is going on here? Answer, plenty, for starters. Now, quite a few of you in here this afternoon will be Bereans. So go to a good book and look up T. Campbell's monograph on the China health studies. And here's what you'll find out. This stuff is new. The neighbors aren't onto this. That's why they're dying. Okay, for starters. Classical Western girls in Western China before McDonald's and before all those cement highways. If you think the Chinese are playing games with bamboo, visit the place. They're building skyscrapers, and they're building highways like it's going out of style, and they're making smog like you. The air in China is terrible. Been there. Okay. These simple girls in simple Western China, they start menstruating from 15. Here go the pews. 1 year per pew. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. New York Times last week, 20% of Afro-American girls have stage 2 development of the breasts at 7 years of age. Now, where we're headed for is estrogen. Here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 20% of girls in America, there's about 2,000 cases. New stuff, nothing old about it. 20% of them are in estrogen trouble at 7 years of age. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. This is AIDS for menstruation. 11, 12, 13, 14. Here's where the Chinese girls start. 15 years. I wouldn't dare ask this. No, unless there's a way to do it. Everybody close your eyes. Is there any woman in the audience that knows somebody that started menstruating at 15? Here's where the Chinese girls start. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and the average is 17. Back row question, third generation. Dr. Baldwin, so what? In other words, what boring nonsense is this? I need my lollipop. Okay? Here's what's going on. The people who have the healthiest relationship with cancer of the breast start menstruating at an average of 17 years. Not 11, 12, and 13. Now here's what. The estrogen surge pushes growth in the breast. And this, the DNA balance and the immune system are in such shape that this sets the person up for cancer. And those of you in the know should be well aware that you can't tell a woman after breast surgery that she's cured for 17 years. And if they tell you, Madam Customer, it's been 5 years since you had your surgery, you are cured. Maybe. 17 years is what it really takes. Okay? Now that is not politically correct nonsense. No. I'm a scientist, not a pleasant extrovert physician who would like to make as close to $1,000 a day as possible. Get the picture? All right. So the estrogen surge drives this cancer just like testosterone does in the man, which is quite another story. Okay. Now, before we go another second, let me tell you, Dr. Margie and I have friends in California now who have raised their daughters that started menstruating 17 years. Mull that over in your Laodicean frying pan. 17 years now. Now look, before you think, ho-hum, more malarkey from the right wing. Not quite. Were you aware that in Norway, 300 years ago, the average for the whole nation, 17? What is going on here? This turns on the pineal gland, a little neglected gland in the middle of the brain. Okay, and this pineal gland, why 100 years ago, med school teachers would say, students, here, we're discussing the pineal gland. The pineal gland we inherited from the lizards. You can use it in your practice as a marker for space-occupying lesions in the brain. If the pineal, usually calcified in conventional Americans, if the pineal is pushed over to one side, look out for tumor, like Ted Kennedy got and killed him, that pushes the pineal. Next, they go to the next gland. Now we know that the pineal is an essential gland. It's the middle of health for the immune system, for aging, and to put an hormonal harness on the hypothalamus so that the teenager years will be tolerable instead of like they are. Mull that over. Now, here, just a touch. This is neuroendocrinology. Front row neuroendocrinology. Look, here's what we're saying. Wortman, MIT, sheds light on this question. Wortman it's all published. The brighter the lights and the later the lights, the less the melatonin. And the less the melatonin, the more stormy the teenager years are, because melatonin is supposed to keep the hypothalamus in the harness until the frontal lobe is ready to run the brain instead of being a passenger. So here's what we've got. We have got millions of teenagers who are adults at the bottom of the brain and brats in front, and smart alecks in the back of the brain. And so what do we got? Several problems going several directions. Is this quite clear? Yes. It is quite clear indeed. So, now, parentheses. Have you noticed, dear North Americans, that the average chicken factory keeps the lights on how often? Why? Because these ignorant, greedy chicken factory people do not know that chickens are supposed to go to bed at about sundown, and their melatonin is supposed to keep them out of cancer trouble. So what do? Leave the lights on and feed them meat scrap, and then wonder, well, why are Edgar's children getting so much leukemia and lymphosarcoma and Wilms tumor and all this other kind of stuff, you see? So look, a modern factory chicken egg is not worth eating. No. You heard about salmonella? 500 million eggs withdrawn in the last month? Yeah, sure. But salmonella is dandruff on the chicken front. Dandruff. You know, a thorough cooking will take care of salmonella with great ease. But if go to the government, I did this, and certainly know what I'm talking about. Government Printing Office of Washington. Could I please buy Bulletin 970? And the man looks at his list and he says, "Sorry, sir, out of print." Now, I'm indebted to my father for this. Here's the courteous thing to do. "Sorry, I made this trip to the government printing office." Turn around and leave. No, it's not my dad. Said, "Could I speak to your supervisor, please?" Here comes the supervisor. And I said, "I'm studying the cancer cell over at George Washington University, and I need bulletin 970. You know what he said? "Yes, sir." And he went back and got Cancer of the Chicken, official bulletin about this thick, full of pictures of cancer of chicken. One of the major cancers of the chicken is cancer of the brain, like killed Kennedy. 50 years ago in South Africa, they proved that an ultrafiltrate from cerebrospinal fluid of chicken will give cancer to other animals in their brains. How glamorous. Have you ever seen your mother make mayonnaise? How's it done? You start the beater going, and you take raw eggs, and they tap on the corner of the bowl, and with one hand, they drop raw eggs into mayonnaise. And this is the reason why Adventist children from Dan to Beersheba are getting leukemia like it's going on. Look, Adventist leukemia is, their score, just being conversational, is D minus, not F, but certainly not B, D. Pretty close to flunking. And one of the reasons why is raw eggs. Okay, so what do we need? We need wills. We need willpower. You better believe it. For it is God which worketh in you, both to will and to do of his good pleasure. Isn't that sensible? Can you think of a better place to get help and power than from heaven? Yes, indeed. Your part is to put your will on the side of Christ. Your nature is brought under the control of his Spirit. Even your thoughts are subject to him. Thus, an entire change will be wrought in your life. Isn't that something? Look at there. Thus, an entire change will be wrought in your life. Amazing Grace 209. It's true. So success and failure quite largely turns on a healthy function of the will in the frontal lobe of the brain. You can never be successful in elevating yourself unless your will is on the side of Christ, cooperating with the Spirit of God. Do not feel that you cannot say, but say, "I can, I will." And God has pledged his Holy Spirit to help you in what? Every decided effort. Now, if you're a university person, particularly a liberal Seventh-day Adventist university person, here's the reaction of that. Here we go again. Right-wing legalism. Well, it could be used that way. But look, there's good news. The creator of the universe loves us, doesn't he? Amen. How much does he love us? A little? Why, his love is so big that he will even wash Judas's feet. When all he would have had to do would be this. They get together in a little group. Fellows, do you remember that lady that gave us the money yesterday? And since it was so much, there should be 3, 6, 5 units of money in the bag. Judas, please empty it. You know, it's an audit. So Judas empties the bag on the table. Oopsie-dee. Most of the money is gone. Now, why didn't Jesus do that? Why did he tolerate this high voltage crook for 3.5 years? Well, that's a rather complicated question. Part of the answer is this. Judas was professor of applied selfishness. And he did his job so well that after he hung by a rope from the tree in suicide, only 1 out of 12 of the disciples became entrepreneurs. I mean, in a sense. Look, 11 of these disciples changed, and they and their followers changed the entire world in 1 generation, right? And they went places, and they did things. Yes. Yes, they did. So that Jesus loves Judas and helped him, did his very best. And in the process, saved 11 of them from conventional commercial pursuits, which was really quite an issue. Because you remember Peter said, quote, I go a-fishing. But he won victories, real victories. All right. So, to reach eternal success, we got to put the puzzle together, and we got to go forward. Seriously. Success is not the result of chance or of destiny. It is the outworking of God's own providence, the reward of faith and discussion, of virtue and persevering what? Effort. Now, that's not popular. No. People want a quick fix. They want to float to success. But this is not the way that Ben Carson did it. If you think that an average young person, particularly from the ghetto, can really make a magnificent difference in this world, you need to take a real good look at this, because people need to cooperate. They need to cooperate with God, and they need to study. They need to work. I remember in Hawaii, at a big meeting, ASI in Hawaii, Dr. Carson gave a magnificent presentation. And in the middle of his presentation, here's what he did. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to the reason why I'm here today. And he asked his mother to stand up. It was magnificent. And here's what the rest of us do. Hundreds of us in this plush hotel in Hawaii, we stood up to a man to honor Mother. Now, have you ever heard of Hannah? The golden age of Israel started with Hannah. You know, little Samuel. And you remember that this great woman, she gave her son, her darling son, away at about 3 years of age. Gave him away. And look, what did this young fellow do? He started the schools of the prophets. And David got in this revival and reformation. And this went to Solomon. And it went from there to the apex of the Jewish program to save the world. And then, thanks to women, wine, money, and politics, they went down to the mud and have been there ever since. Hannah. Look, you may have heard your grandmother talk about this. The hand that rocks the cradle does what? It's true. And we ought to have colleges and universities that teach this. We ought to really get serious about it. Okay. The will, now this is entirely different. Fresh air. The will goes with the labor of the hands. You see right there, will. The will goes with the labor of the hands. Ministry of Healing 239. So here's a lady gardening, and you see this man running this plane. It takes brains to plane a board. The grain changes. Every board is different. It takes skill and work to really to make good furniture. It takes some doing. Now the will, look, here's the concept worthy of your whole afternoon. The will is like a muscle. You use it, you get it. You get a skillful, powerful will, and you can make a magnificent difference in your community and in the world. There's really something to us. Now, if you understand what's going on today, you can think something like this. Aha. Look, the great physician chose workers to change the world in one generation, not philosophers. Look, these workers, they have willpower, and they use it. And their faculties are focused instead of scattered. They're winners instead of just talkers. Whereas philosophers, the big question in Athens, when Christianity got started, the big question in Athens would be something like this. Do we exist? Existentialism and all such. And in Jerusalem, they got this to a fine edge. Jerusalem works like this. Is this handkerchief so heavy that I should hire a Philistine to carry it on the Sabbath day? That's Jerusalem. That's Jerusalem. Much ado about very little. Yeah. Now look, what does this turn on? In part, because workers have focused faculties. If they don't, they'll fall off the roof. You can't weld a trailer hitch without focused faculties. You can't build a decent house, fix a car without focus. I know some mechanics try and they have a problem. I remember a lady out in Loma Linda. She got a brand new Oldsmobile. She went up the hills in Redlands and the engine made dreadful noises. The head bolts weren't tight in a brand new Oldsmobile. Okay. No trouble. A new engine will take care of this. Yes. All right. Now here's what I'm saying. Real education demands real work, or you don't have balance. You can't have optimum willpower without work. P.S. Take Christ. How many years did Christ work? Well, we don't know precisely, but up to 30 years of age. But you can count on it. Starting young, he helped Daddy work. And he learned the engrams, the attitudes, the patterns of how to hold the board when Dad is sawing so that it won't pinch. You know, some of you will know what this is, and some of you won't. But this little Jesus, he got on the work program for 30 years. Yes. And he had willpower that could face 1,000 frowns without flinching. Right? Yes. And look, we're headed for the climax of the history of the whole 6,000 years. And if there's anybody in the entire world that really needs to come clean on these issues and know where they're going and have their will joined to God and truth, should be us. It's very serious stuff. Yes. All right. Results. This is an artist's conception of this young man, David. And you see that brawny giant on the ground? How did he get there? Focused will. You better believe it. Look, now here's what David was facing. One, the frowns of his brothers. This little kid should get back with the sheep where he belongs. That's society. See, brothers. And the average soldier, who does this teenager think he is? You see? And look, this giant is big. And you remember that giants were so potent in the thinking of the 10 spies that it freaked them out, right? Sure did. And so along comes this teenager. See, the street term would be, they would say, this young fellow has guts. Well, what that really is willpower. See, he's got focus. His brain is going one direction, and he thinks, God is in heaven, this giant is going to compost. Now, he didn't throw a candy bar to the giant. Now, excuse a little personal experience. I was raised on a 1,000-acre farm. My dad was the farm manager. He studied at UC Davis and knew what he was doing. He got a hold of an old shoe. This is the bottom of the depression. Got an old shoe, took the leather out of the back pair of work shoes, and made the pocket for a sling. Cut top-notch leather, deer leather shoestrings. Fastened these leather shoestrings to this fancy pocket with a slit in it. And you can put an egg-shaped rock in this sling, and you put a loop on the third finger, a knot on between the thumb and the second, and Don't let the musicians fool you. You do not hit Goliath by swinging like this. Eeny, miny, mo, swing. No, that's artists. No, the way it's really done is this. You run towards the target, and you take this, and you pull it down like this, down, over, back, and you take every muscle in your body, and you like this. And I've tried it, and know what I'm talking about. You can throw an egg-shaped rock 250 yards through the air before it ever touches the ground with a sling. And this is the weapon that David mastered. And he practiced so much. You know, when the sheep are visiting or eating, why, he is taking his sling. And he became an expert shot. You better believe it. And so this Goliath fellow encountered the wrong will. He sure did. Now, another little experience. And I was raised at Pacific Union College back when it was a college instead of a club. And a city fellow came out to visit us, and he wanted to try my sling. And so he put a rock in the sling, and I thought it was safer back of a garage door. So I get back of the garage door to watch what this city fellow's going to do next. See? And he goes around and around like this, and he lets loose this rock, and the rock came straight towards me, and it hit the garage door and sunk into the wood that far. And so, yes. And so I came that close to being compost myself. Yes. Yes. So this sling business, you see, was real, not imaginary, and not some quick fix of placebo therapy for this Philistine, for this giant. Okay, David did it. And we need people that have the courage of Mother Teresa. See, somebody that will stick to a target until they make a beautiful, magnificent difference for humanity. And it can be done. It is being done. Oh yes, there are people all over the planet that are making a great difference, and we can be happy about it. Right. So the temptations of Satan, of the perverted appetite, is twice as great as it was several generations ago. So, victory over the belt is possible. Of course it is. When the will is dormant, the imagination becomes abnormal. Now, this puts us in the middle of psychiatry. Look, when people don't work, when they don't will, and they don't have a healthy will, then the imagination becomes abnormal. And when you stir television, computer games, and peer group dynamics in this, you have plenty of room for plenty of psychopathology. Now, we have really got it. To subdue self and the passions under the control of the will is the greatest conquest that men and women can achieve. Volume 3. Gives Satan no chance to say, you are a wretched hypocrite. Close the door so that Satan will not thus accuse and dishearten you. Say, I will believe. I do believe that God is my helper, and you will find that you are triumphant in God. Volume 5. This stuff is valuable, and it will really make a difference. It is God that worketh for you. You will come forth from the molding process of vessel unto honor. Yes. Now, before sunrise, I found this morning. Pamphlet 100, page 25. Look. the same indomitable will that gave success to Dr. Kellogg in his medical career is essential to whom? That means us, doesn't it? Really. And so look, this afternoon can be the beginning of a winning life. Really. This stuff is not imaginary. Yes. Principal success. Now look at this. God does not bid the youth to be less aspiring. The elements of character that make a man successful and honored among men, the irrepressible desire for some greater good, the indomitable will. Look at that. You see that right there? The indomitable will. What kind of a will is that? Take Thomas Alva Edison. Look. He had workmen, he had a laboratory, and he had a passion. We're going to make an incandescent light. And you remember, the men said, we've tried 900 things. It won't work. Do you know what Edison said? Fine, 900 things that won't work. Forward. Now we've got light. Why? In part, because Edison had will. See, indomitable will. America was not discovered by rowboats in the Mediterranean. Yes. As the will of man cooperates with the will of God, it becomes what? Now look, if you're awake this afternoon, you can see how that common people in cooperation with God can make a beautiful difference. Yes. COL 3, 3, 3. Yes. So it can be, we need settled choice. You see, we need to join up with heaven and go forward in faith with him and for others. All right. So the puzzle of life can be fit together, and we can cooperate with God to really do things for the community, for our families, and for our careers. So I'd like to end with these little thoughts. What is needed, get a load of this, see what you think of this. What is needed now is not spectator Christianity, where we watch TV people do fancy things. That's not enough. Not virtual Christianity. Not passive TV modeled mediocrity. We're not robots. No. But by the cooperation with Christ, by our wills cooperating with God who loves us and helps us, we can become not losers in the daily battle of choices. We will build personality and character. Council Teachers 2:22 says this: strength of character consists in two things, power of will and power of self-control. Council Teachers 2:2:2. So look, your time investment this afternoon can be a good move. And you can find out that the executive centers in the brain can be built and focused. And each one of us can be winners forever because we're on the winning team. And we can do things for God and humanity. We can say with Joshua, choose you this day whom ye will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Yes, may the Lord help us to be winners forever.